programs for the next 8 hours so that ABC News can bring you full coverage of the 1972 elections. ABC News presents complete nationwide coverage of tonight's Election 72. Brought to you by J.C. Penney. Tomorrow morning, our 1,700 stores and our catalog will be waiting to help you find what you're looking for. Now from election headquarters in New York, the anchormen of the ABC Evening News, Harry Reasoner and Howard K. Smith.
Good evening. Well, at last the long wait is over. Tonight we find out whether the pollsters were right and there's going to be a Nixon landslide. Partly right, he'll win a modest victory, or whether they were wrong and McGovern's going to win. As you can see, we already have some popular votes up on our board, with 1% of the nation's precincts having reported in. Nixon has 66% of the votes counted so far. These come mainly from 3 states, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, and McGovern 33%. We also have a state result, in the presidential election. In the presidential election in the state of Indiana, Nixon is the winner of Indiana's 13 electoral votes by projection from the result in key precincts. To repeat, Nixon carries Indiana, no surprise.
And another no surprise so far in the state of Kentucky in the presidential race. President ABC News projects that Nixon will win that state. With 48% of the precincts reported, actually he has 65% of the vote. He carried it in 1968, but by a much smaller margin, and of course that's because there was George Wallace there. One of the things we'll be doing in tonight's coverage of the elections is to keep a kind of running total of electoral votes. And since Mr. Nixon has won Indiana and Kentucky, according to ABC News projection, he has won 22 of the magic figure of 270. Mr. McGovern has won none and would not be expected to in these early reports, which come from Nixon states. I suppose we should explain what we're talking about when we say projections.
I think we'd better, because we're going to be projecting fast and a lot in many states in the next hour and a half to 2 hours. Throughout the evening, we'll use that word projections, and we'll use it in respect to Senate and governor races, as well as projections on how the states vote for the presidency. These determinations are made by political experts at our decision desk. Their goal is speed and accuracy, but with a heavy emphasis on accuracy. As in past elections, our policy tonight will be to wait until the polls are closed in a state before we make any projected results for that state. We'll project the presidential winner whenever the total number of projected electoral votes passes 270, whether all the polls are closed or not. That will have to happen after 8 o'clock here in the East, when many of the polls will be closed. There's no evidence whatever that projections have any effect on people who've not yet voted, but by waiting until the polls close, we can be absolutely sure we're reporting the results and not influencing them. We will not make projections for the House of Representatives. Those apparent winners will be determined by the raw vote. Now, I would like to call your attention to the presidential race, the raw vote, not the projection. We have projected that Indiana has been won by President Nixon, but here's the way the raw vote looks in the presidential race in Indiana. In the presidential race in Indiana, President Nixon leads, as you can see by the figures there. Only 12% of the precincts are in, but they include our key precincts, which tell us that Nixon's going to win. Now for one close race in the Senate in the state of Kentucky. In the state of Kentucky, it's been a ding-dong race all of this short evening so far between Democrat Walter Huddleston and Republican Louis Nunn. Each has 50%, and that's the way it's gone, and it may go that way all the way through the evening.
That's one of those Kentucky senator races that you get used to over the years. They seem to, whatever they feel nationally, they always make it close on senator. As might be expected with ABC News projecting President Nixon taking Indiana's presidential votes, the Republican Otis Bowen, a candidate for governor, is also the apparent winner over Democrat Matthew Welch, a former governor in Indiana. He's running ahead by a healthy 18%. ABC News now does predict that Otis Bowen, who is Speaker of the State House of Representatives, not as well known as the man he ran against, but has supported President Nixon's policies, and it's apparently doing him a substantial amount of good. ABC News predicts that's the first governor. We're talking tonight about 18 races for governor, with 20 Democratic holdovers and 12 Republicans who don't have to run for anything. The former governor in Indiana, Edgar Whitcomb, was also a Republican, so far in the net gain area, there is no net gain. One Republican has held one Republican seat. One of the things we're going to be doing tonight is to look around the country at where the people are who are critically affected by this election, or who will be coming out with victory or concession statements. We will, for instance, maintain cameras and reporters and correspondents in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is the first time in history that anybody has maintained cameras in Sioux Falls, South Dakota to see what a presidential candidate would say. This is where George McGovern is spending the evening. He voted earlier today in Mitchell, which is his nominal home, but Sioux Falls is the biggest town in South Dakota. And this is the place where the victory celebrations or the concession statement will come. Sooner or later, we'll also be at the Shoreham Hotel in New York, where President Nixon, who is watching television after a family dinner in the White House, will go to make his victory or concession statement. And we will also go to some of the places that are not national, but which are very fascinating. In West Virginia, where John D. Rockefeller IV is running for governor on the Democratic ticket. This is where he'll be, and he's not far from the governor's mansion, where Governor Archie Moore, a Republican governor and who's an unusual situation for West Virginia, is trying to hold off his challenge. Then we will also go from time to time to Columbus, Ohio, which during the last 2 or 3 months has been the ABC city, where correspondent Jim Kincaid has been trying to follow what a typical American city thinks and is doing about this election. Tonight he's assembled a number of people with varying attitudes, and we just hope that through the evening as we go to them there are no serious disagreements.
Well, thank you very much, Harry, for that tour, which we're going to take most of the night tonight. By the way, we're going to have many slips of the tongue. Harry said the Shoreham Hotel in New York. I'm sure he meant Washington, D.C., where the president may appear. Anyhow, we'll have more on Election 72 in just a moment.
This is the new JCPenney washer, built to handle up to 18 pounds of heavy clothes, or to machine wash fabrics you normally wash by hand. Just set the dial to the right wash program. It'll do the rest. And this is the matching dryer, with a choice of temperature settings and a special timer. When it's through, it tells you. All totally simple to use. And the price is our second best deed of the year. Our best deed? That's our guarantee. The kind you've always looked for. No ifs, ands, or buts. No small print.
During the first year after purchase, we provide home service parts and labor to repair any defect except surface finishes, which are guaranteed for 30 days. During the second year, we provide replacement parts. Labor is extra. During the third, fourth, and fifth years, we provide replacement parts to repair the washer transmission. Labor is extra. Contact us for our car service.
At JCPenney, we know what you're looking for.
This has been a peculiar election campaign. The prediction was for apathy. In fact, they say more people are turning out than ever before. There's been a heavy turnout in many places in spite of bad weather. It's been a peculiar election because all the pollsters have agreed that Richard Nixon's going to win a remarkable landslide. Harry, from what you've seen, do you believe the pollsters are going to prove right?
Well, we've certainly seen nothing in what Mr. McGovern called the only poll that counts and what President Nixon called the only poll that counts. We've certainly seen nothing so far to indicate that they're wrong. We have not seen the cases that are regarded as close. Kentucky, Indiana were expected to go heavily for Nixon. They already have, and this year with George Wallace not there, they would assume they would go heavier. They have. I think all you can say so far is something negative, which is no evidence of a major upset.
Well, I hate to be conventional, but I think the pollsters just can't be that wrong. Their methods are so sophisticated now. Unlike 1948, they polled up right up to the end, and I expect that they will prove right in the end. Now, I don't expect they'll prove as right as a friend of mine in the White House said to me the other night. He said McGovern will carry the District of Columbia and Massachusetts and nothing else.
Well, some people say he won't even carry Massachusetts. The polls were about 5 or 6% wrong in 1948. They allow that kind of a percentage of error now, and they would have to be, the major polls would have to be somewhere from 20 to 30% wrong this year to have that same kind of thing. One initial bit of evidence that they probably are right is that our early indications from our key precincts in Ohio, which is one of the states that George McGovern would have hoped to pull an upset in, is that so far Nixon is running very well, cutting across all boundaries in the state, including some areas that are historically Democratic. I think perhaps it's time that we got a reading from the two correspondents who are following the two candidates. And I suggest that we go first, in view of what has happened, to Frank Reynolds, who's out in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Frank?
Yes, well, Harry, we're making history tonight by having television cameras here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We're making it right at this moment because there are two network correspondents about 5 yards apart, both reporting to the nation on the situation in Senator McGovern's hotel headquarters. The last time I saw the senator, just a couple of hours ago, he seemed remarkably serene, not at all like a man who believes in the polls. He mentioned last night that he kind of hoped that when people got into the privacy of the polling place, that they would be afflicted with a sort of spiritual seizure and would think things over and then, of course, go his way. But he's not, at least from what I could tell, terribly disturbed about reading all the pollsters. Of course, it's been an article of faith with him that the pollsters are going to be proved wrong. He agrees with the president that the only poll that counts is the one that is taken on Election Day. I think the bottom line on Senator McGovern and his attitude tonight is that he is at peace with himself. He has worked very, very hard. Yesterday, for example, he traveled more than 4,000 miles in quest of votes, trying to get his message across. I think he's satisfied that he's done all that he could do, and now he just waits for the American people to tell him what the result will be. That's the story here at the McGovern headquarters, or the McGovern Hotel in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Now to Tom Jarrell at the White House.
Even though the Nixons obviously are very confident of election, the president is still taking a very cautious, measured approach. He had virtually nothing to say to reporters today, both as he voted, as he left El Toro Marine Station in California, and also on board his plane flying here from California. Reporters asked his spokesman, Ron Ziegler, about the latest on Vietnam, and Ziegler didn't want to be drawn into any controversy there. About the most information he could get was that the president had cottage cheese, his standard lunch on board flying here. The Nixons with their family are having dinner tonight here at the White House. Spokesmen don't expect them to go over to the victory celebration, probably until the polls close in California, and that would be about 3 hours from now at about 11 o'clock. Until then, there's a very quiet attitude here. A number of the aides are sitting around their offices, mostly watching television, and so far there's no attitude of great victory or great expectation, just sort of a standard working night here at the White House. This is Tom Jarrell, ABC News at the White House.
We have, as you know, ABC News has projected President Nixon, the winner of the electoral votes in Kentucky and Indiana. We're also beginning to get some meaningful popular votes, plus some meaningful analysis on some rather major states. For instance, the presidential race in the state of Ohio. There are only 1% of the precincts so far reporting, but Mr. Nixon's lead is 67 to 32, which is a little bit more than 2 to 1, a little bit more than double. And our indications from ABC's key precincts is that he is running strongly all through the state, that this is not just some particular area where Republicans have always won well. The same thing in the state of Tennessee, which is 10 electoral votes, and with 17% of the precincts in, Mr. Nixon is holding an almost unbelievable lead of 70%. In 1968, he took the state, but with only 37%. He almost split it with Governor Wallace, with Senator Humphrey, the third runner. I suppose nobody has ever taken the state of Tennessee by 70% vote.
It would be a big surprise. But Nixon, Tennessee is one of the two southern states where Nixon carried the South in spite of Wallace and Humphrey, the Democrat, in the last election, 1968, 4 years ago. I expect he will carry it quite easily.
I suspect that would indicate also something for Howard Baker's success this year, too, that Tennessee, which went Republican in 1970, is maybe swinging that way.
But the more important of the two states you mentioned, Ohio, is another one Nixon has always won, and Republicans say they expect to double the majority they got in 1968 in Ohio. Nixon beat Kennedy in Ohio in 1960. He beat Humphrey and Wallace in Ohio in 68.
No matter what they say in Virginia, Ohio is really the mother of presidents. There's been an awful lot that have come from there, and mostly Republicans.
George McGovern has paid 11 campaign visits to Ohio. He thinks it's that important. And as we see now, he is not yet leading. But that is one of the mega states, 25 electoral votes. It used to have 26. We'll have more on election 72 in just a moment.
Ford Motor Company and 6,283 Ford and Lincoln Mercury dealers have committed themselves to a common goal: no unhappy owners. And to help reach it, these dealers have made some real improvements in the way they do business. In the service department, for example, you'll find their service work is guaranteed for 90 days or 4,000 miles, whichever comes first. If their repair or replacement fails in normal service during that period, they'll fix it free of charge, parts and labor. And attached to your service bill, there'll be a service report card. Now, you grade the job they do, and it goes right to the dealer himself. And inside your car, you'll find one of these. It's signed by the man who actually did the work. If you own a Ford, Mercury, or Lincoln, that's something to think about. And if you don't, then it is really something to think about. The goal is no unhappy owners. They really mean it. I'd like to prove it to you.
Well, with a long way to go in elections 1972, ABC News at this early hour has projected that President Nixon will win the states of Kentucky and Indiana and is leading in electoral votes 22-0 so far. So far, we have seen nothing to disturb the way the polls indicated things were going to happen, either in the popular vote or in our key precincts. Key precincts is something you'll hear us mention from time to time during the night. They're not something we invented. They're merely precincts carefully and scientifically selected within a state, which by early attention to them, you get a very good idea of what the state is going to do in comparison with what it's done before. ABC News is greatly assisted in this endeavor by the League of Women Voters, who actually put the people out at these key precincts, who find out what the figures are and call us. And from then on, we are able to make our projections.
That's how we're so smart. In the House of Representatives, which we haven't mentioned at all, the House of Representatives, so far the Republicans have 32 seats, 435 to be filled. The Republicans have 32, the Democrats have 57. So far, that is a net gain of 1 seat by the Republicans. And as we've noted before, it's just changed again. The Republicans have 34, the Democrats 60. It'll go right on changing while we're on the air if we stay on it. It's the most changeable of all of the two houses. About 55 members are not coming back. They've either lost primaries or retired, and there's going to be a big turnover this year, but probably not big enough in the Republican column to give them control of the House. We want to go to ABC's election city, a city we chose in the heartland of America as being fairly typical, where we could sound out the feelings of voters throughout the campaign. That's Columbus, Ohio, and here is Jim Kincaid.
The past 3 months have been quite an experience for me because it's been my pleasure and privilege to cover the ABC city and to actually get to be a native in some sort of way. During those 3 months, we've talked to hundreds of people, and we invited a lot of those people to come here to the Royal Inn in Columbus tonight and join us for an election party. There are Democrats here, there are Republicans, there are independents. There might possibly be some people from the American Independent Party, although I can't speak certainly to that. And there are voters who, as recently as a week ago, identified themselves as uncommitted, or perhaps a better word is undecided. We'd like to find out just how they feel about how the election returns are coming in, how it affects their minds according to the way they voted, and we'll be talking to them on during the evening. We have several of them with us here in our Royal Inn studio tonight, and it's going to be interesting to see that there will be some glum faces, I'm sure, and there will probably be some happy faces, and there may be some people who are still undecided and therefore unemotional about the whole thing. I'd like for you to hear now from 3 of the people who did vote during the past week, during the past 24 hours.
My name is Ron Rosen. I'm an eye doctor here in Columbus, Ohio, and I voted for Richard Nixon, and the The best reason I could give, I guess, is that I'm basically a conservative, law and order man, if you wish. And I feel that we've got problems here at home that are far more serious than the Vietnam War, be that sacrilegious if it sounds that way. And I'm just afraid to put a liberal in the White House. And maybe it's because of my advanced years, but I'm just a conservative.
Tony?
My name is Tony King, and I'm a student and part-time secretary, and I voted for Senator George McGovern because I believe of the two candidates, he offers the best policies for the American people.
Very quickly.
My name is Lawrence Gill. I'm an optometrist in Columbus, Ohio here, and I voted for George McGovern. I think I may have had better defense if I voted for Richard Nixon, but when I went into the voting booth, I voted my conscience.
Those are three voters. At least two of them were undecided as recently as just a few days ago when I talked to them. Perhaps later in the evening we'll find out just why. That's it from ABC's Election City.
Harry, I think this is the time to remind people there are about 13 presidential candidates. I think you can see 4 of them on this board we have here. President Nixon, George McGovern, John Schmitz, the AIP candidate, and Dr. Spock from the left of center.
Neither of the other two nor any of the other 7 or whatever it would be seem to be at the moment any real threat. I guess it's been, as opposed to 1968, this is not a third-party thing. We do have an additional projection. ABC News projects that President Nixon will take Mississippi and its 7 electoral votes, which will give him a total now of 29 electoral votes to none for Senator McGovern. This, again, is nothing that was a surprise. Mississippi this year is very definitely Nixon country. And that's the national election story at 22 minutes after the hour.